The bitter wind of early March swept across the rolling countryside of Westmoreland, carrying with it the scent of thawing earth and the promise of spring. Margot Lowell clutched her threadbare woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders as she trudged along the muddy path leading away from the village. Her long blonde hair whipped across her face, partially obscuring her striking blue eyes and high cheekbones that even grief and hunger could not diminish. At 22, Margot had already endured more suffering than most endured in a lifetime. The plague had claimed her husband barely a year into their marriage, and the subsequent winter had taken her parents, leaving her alone to care for her 5-year-old son, Thomas. The boy now walked beside her, his small hand clasped in hers, occasionally jumping to avoid puddles in the rutted path. "Are we almost there, Mother?" Thomas asked, his voice small against the whistling wind. "Nearly, my love," Margot replied, though she was not entirely certain. The letter had arrived 3 days prior, delivered by a weathered messenger who had ridden from the next county. Her grandmother, a woman she had met only twice in her life, had passed away, leaving Margot a small cottage and plot of land on the outskirts of Burrowdale, a day's journey from their former home. In truth, the inheritance was more burden than blessing. Margot had been forced to leave behind what little life she had built, carrying only what she and Thomas could manage on their backs. But with the landlord threatening to evict them for unpaid rent, and winter's hunger still gnawing at their bellies, she had no choice but to accept this dubious gift from a woman who had been all but a stranger. As they crested the hill, the cottage came into view, and Margot's heart sank. Even from a distance, she could see the sagging thatch roof and the crumbling stone chimney. A small garden plot, overgrown with weeds, stretched behind the structure, and beyond that, a copse of gnarled apple trees stood like bent old men against the gray sky. "Is that our new home?" Thomas asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. Margot forced a smile. "It is. And we shall make it beautiful again, you will see." As they approached, a large black dog bounded from behind the cottage, barking loudly. Thomas shrieked and hid behind his mother's skirts, but the dog slowed as it neared them, its tail beginning to wag cautiously. "He is just saying hello," Margot assured her son, though her own heart was racing. The dog circled them, sniffing curiously before sitting at Margot's feet and looking up at her with intelligent eyes. "Does he belong to us now, too?" Thomas asked, slowly extending a hand toward the creature. "I suppose he must," Margot replied, noticing the worn leather collar around the animal's neck. The letter mentioned a dog named Barley. "Barley," Thomas repeated, and the dog's ears perked up. "I like him." With the dog following close behind, they approached the cottage. The wooden door hung slightly askew on rusted hinges, and it took Margot several pushes to force it open. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. A single room comprised the entire dwelling, a hearth along one wall, a small table with 2 chairs, a straw mattress in one corner, and various items scattered throughout, broken crockery, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and an old trunk pushed against the far wall. Margot's shoulders slumped. This was to be their salvation? This dilapidated hovel, with its rotting floor and cobweb corners? "Mother, look!" Thomas exclaimed, rushing to the hearth where a large, black iron pot hung from a hook. "We can make soup!" His excitement over such a simple thing brought tears to Margot's eyes. "Yes, my love. We shall make soup as soon as we can find something to put in it." That first night was the hardest. They had brought little food with them, and the cottage offered less. They shared a small crust of bread and slept huddled together on the straw mattress, Barley curled at their feet, providing welcomed warmth against the chill that seeped through the walls. As dawn broke, Margot rose quietly, leaving Thomas still sleeping. She needed to assess their situation and determine how they would survive. The garden, though overgrown, might yield some early spring vegetables if properly tended. Perhaps there were fish in the small stream that ran behind the property. She was examining the garden when Barley bounded up beside her, something clutched in his mouth. He dropped it at her feet, a dead rabbit. "Good boy," she whispered, reaching down to stroke his head. At least they would not starve today. Over the next few days, Margot worked tirelessly to make the cottage habitable. She patched holes in the walls with mud and straw, swept away years of dust and debris, and cleared the garden of weeds. Thomas helped as best he could, but spent much of his time playing with Barley or exploring the surrounding woods under his mother's watchful eye. It was on the fourth day that Thomas made the first discovery. "Mother! Mother!" he called excitedly, rushing into the cottage where Margot was attempting to mend a tear in her dress. The neckline had grown so worn that it dipped lower than was proper, revealing more of her collarbone and the swell of her chest than she would like. But fabric was a luxury she could not afford. "What is it, Thomas?" she asked, setting aside her sewing. "Barley found something. Come see." He tugged at her hand, pulling her toward the door. Margot followed her son outside to where Barley was scratching frantically at the earth beneath one of the apple trees. As they approached, the dog looked up, barked once, then resumed his digging. "What has he found?" Margot wondered aloud, kneeling beside the growing hole despite the mud that stained her already worn skirts. "Treasure," Thomas declared with all the certainty of a child. Margot smiled indulgently, but gasped when her hand, reaching to calm Barley's frantic digging, touched something solid beneath the soil. Working alongside the dog, she excavated a small wooden box, its surface weathered but intact, secured with a tarnished metal clasp. "Open it, Mother," Thomas urged, bouncing on his toes. With trembling fingers, Margot released the clasp and lifted the lid. Inside lay not gold or jewels as Thomas had hoped, but a book, a thick, leather-bound tome with yellowed pages and a faded inscription on the cover. "What is it?" Thomas asked, his excitement dimming slightly at the sight of mere paper. "It is a book," Margot replied, carefully lifting it from its container. "A cookbook, by the look of it." Indeed, as she carefully turned the fragile pages, she saw handwritten recipes, notes, and drawings of plants and herbs. It appeared to be her grandmother's cookbook, containing not only recipes for common dishes, but also remedies for various ailments and detailed information about local plants and their uses. "Is that treasure?" Thomas asked, clearly disappointed. Margot smiled, running her fingers over the careful script. "Knowledge can be the greatest treasure of all, my love." That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep, Margot sat by the hearth, a small candle burning as she pored over her grandmother's cookbook. The old woman had been known in her village as a healer, Margot remembered vaguely from childhood stories. This book contained her life's wisdom, recipes for breads and stews, yes, but also salves for burns, tinctures for fevers, and poultices for wounds. One recipe in particular caught Margot's eye, a simple bread that claimed to cure stomach ailments. The ingredients were common enough: flour, water, salt, and a specific mixture of herbs that grew wild in the surrounding woods. On a whim, Margot decided she would try to make it the next day. The following morning, after gathering the necessary herbs with Thomas's enthusiastic help, Margot mixed the dough according to her grandmother's precise instructions. As it baked in the hearth, a wonderful aroma filled the small cottage, making even Barley lift his nose and sniff appreciatively. When the bread was done, Margot broke off a piece for Thomas and herself. It had an unusual flavor, earthy and slightly sweet, but was not unpleasant. To her surprise, the persistent ache in her stomach that had plagued her since her husband's death seemed to ease after eating it. 3 days later, Margot awoke to knocking at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found an elderly woman from the village leaning heavily on a walking stick. "Are you the granddaughter of Agnes Lowell?" the woman asked, her rheumy eyes assessing Margot. "I am," Margot replied, suddenly conscious of how her worn dress clung to her slender frame, the neckline revealing more than she would like to a stranger. "I heard tell you have moved into her cottage," the woman continued. "I am Martha Sutton. Your grandmother once made me a bread that eased my stomach pains. I have suffered greatly since she passed." "I wondered." Margot blinked in surprise. "You wish for the stomach bread?" Martha nodded eagerly. "I would pay, of course. Not much, but what I can spare." Thinking of the nearly empty larder and Thomas's growing body, Margot nodded. "I have some. Please come in." Martha was delighted with the bread Margot provided, promising to return in a week for more. True to her word, she brought not only a few copper coins but also a small basket of eggs from her hens. Word spread quickly through the village. By the end of the week, 3 more villagers had appeared at Margot's door seeking remedies from Agnes's granddaughter. A man with a persistent cough, a young mother whose baby would not sleep, an elderly farmer with aching joints, all came with their ailments and their modest offerings. Margot consulted her grandmother's cookbook for each of them, carefully preparing the remedies as instructed. To her astonishment, they seemed to work. The baby slept, the cough eased, the joints found relief. As the days passed, more villagers arrived seeking help. Margot's garden, now cleared and planted with vegetables and the medicinal herbs detailed in the cookbook, began to flourish. The coins and trade goods, eggs, milk, wool, occasional meat, meant that she and Thomas no longer went to bed hungry. But not everyone viewed Margot's sudden change in fortune with happiness. Zachary Olden, the village bailiff, appeared at her door one morning with a scowl on his face and 2 men-at-arms at his back. "Mistress Lowell," he said, his eyes lingering on the curve of her neck before meeting her gaze. "There have been complaints." "Complaints?" Margot repeated, instinctively pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You are practicing medicine without permission from the Lord or the Church," he stated flatly. "Some say witchcraft." Fear clutched at Margot's heart. "I am merely using my grandmother's recipes to help those who ask. There is no witchcraft here." Olden's eyes narrowed. "Nevertheless, Lord Harrington wishes to speak with you. You will come to the manor house tomorrow at midday." After he left, Margot sank to the floor, trembling. Accusations of witchcraft were not to be taken lightly, especially for a young, beautiful widow living alone with her child. She considered fleeing, but where would they go? This cottage, humble as it was, had become their home. That night, as Thomas slept, Margot returned to her grandmother's cookbook, desperately searching for anything that might help her situation. As she turned the pages, she noticed something odd. Certain letters in the text appeared to be written with slightly different ink. Curious, she began noting these letters, and to her astonishment, they formed words when put together. Hidden messages woven into the recipes themselves. One message in particular stood out. "North wall, 3rd stone from hearth, 3 down." Heart racing, Margot moved to the hearth and counted the stones. Using a knife, she carefully pried at the mortar around the indicated stone until it came loose. Behind it was a small cavity containing a sealed letter and a small leather pouch. With trembling hands, Margot broke the seal on the letter. "My dearest granddaughter, if you are reading this, I have passed from this world, and you have discovered my true legacy. The remedies in my cookbook are genuine and will serve you well, but they are not my only gift to you. 20 years ago, I served as midwife to Lady Harrington during a difficult birth. What the village does not know is that she bore twins, a boy and a girl. Lord Harrington, desperate for a male heir but fearing the girl would weaken the boy's claim, ordered me to dispose of the female child. I could not murder an innocent, so I claimed the girl had been stillborn while secretly giving her to a childless couple in the next county. The proof of this birth, the midwife record bearing Lord Harrington's seal and signature ordering the child's death, and a lock of the twins' identical hair, is enclosed in this pouch. Should Lord Harrington ever threaten you, this evidence will be your protection. Use this knowledge wisely, my child. Some secrets are dangerous, but some can save lives. Your loving grandmother." Agnes. Margot's hands shook as she opened the small pouch, finding exactly what the letter described: an official record with the Harrington seal and 2 identical locks of dark hair tied with thread. The next day, Margot dressed Thomas in his cleanest clothes and, leaving Barley to guard the cottage, walked to Harrington Manor with her head held high. She had sewn the damning evidence into the lining of her dress, close to her heart. The great hall of the manor was intimidating, with its high ceiling and stone walls adorned with weapons and tapestries. Lord Harrington sat in a carved chair upon a dais, Bailiff Olden standing at his right hand. Both men's eyes widened slightly as Margot entered, her golden hair gleaming in the light from the high windows, her face flushed from the walk, her simple beauty somehow enhanced rather than diminished by her poverty. "So this is the herbalist causing such a stir in my village," Lord Harrington said, his voice carrying across the hall. He was an imposing man in his 50s, with a gray beard and cold eyes. "They say you cure ailments with strange potions and incantations." "I use only herbs and remedies recorded in my grandmother's cookbook, my lord," Margot replied, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. "No incantations, only careful preparation." "Your grandmother," Lord Harrington repeated, his expression darkening slightly. "Agnes Lowell." "Yes, my lord. She was known as a skilled midwife and healer." The lord's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And now you follow in her footsteps, dispensing remedies from her recipes." "I do, my lord. The people come to me freely, and I help them as I can." "And charge them for this help," Bailiff Olden interjected. "I accept what they can spare," Margot acknowledged. "I have a child to feed." Lord Harrington studied her for a long moment. "Your activities have not been approved by myself or the church. This must cease immediately." Margot took a deep breath. "My lord, before you make your final judgment, I believe there is something you should know." She reached into her bodice and withdrew the pouch, holding it out. "My grandmother left me not only her recipes, but also certain documents that might be of interest to you." The lord's face remained impassive, but a flicker of something, concern, fear, passed through his eyes. He motioned for Olden to take the pouch. As the bailiff examined the contents, his face paled. He hurried to Lord Harrington's side and whispered urgently in his ear. The lord's expression hardened as he listened, his knuckles whitening where they gripped the arms of his chair. After a tense silence, Lord Harrington dismissed everyone from the hall except for Margot, Thomas, and Bailiff Olden. "Where is she?" he demanded once the doors had closed. "The girl child?" "I do not know, my lord," Margot answered truthfully. "My grandmother's letter did not say. But the proof of her birth and your instructions regarding her fate are clear enough." Lord Harrington's face was a storm of emotions. "What do you want?" "I want only to live in peace, my lord. To use my grandmother's knowledge to help those in need, and to raise my son without fear." Another long silence followed as Lord Harrington considered his options. Finally he spoke. "You may continue your healing work with my official blessing. In return, those documents will remain between us." "And a tithe of protection," Margot added boldly. "No accusations of witchcraft or impropriety shall touch me or my son." The lord's lip curled slightly, but he nodded. "Agreed." As spring turned to summer, Margot's small cottage became a place of healing and hope for the village of Burrowdale. The garden flourished with herbs and vegetables, and a steady stream of villagers came seeking remedies for their ailments. With Lord Harrington's protection, no one dared accuse her of witchcraft, though whispers of her sudden favor with the lord circulated through the village. Thomas grew stronger each day, helping his mother in the garden and playing with Barley, who continued to prove his worth by hunting rabbits and keeping watch over their home. The dog had developed an uncanny ability to sense when someone approaching was in dire need, often alerting Margot with specific barks before a desperate visitor even knocked. One warm evening, as Margot sat outside her cottage grinding herbs for a fever remedy, Barley suddenly raised his head and barked in his special way, 3 sharp barks followed by a whine. "Someone comes," Margot told Thomas, who was playing nearby. "Someone in great need." Minutes later, a young woman appeared on the path, supporting an elderly man who could barely walk. Margot recognized her as Mary from the mill, though she had never sought Margot's help before. "Please," Mary gasped as she approached. "My father cannot breathe properly. The physician in the next town said nothing can be done, but I heard you might help." Margot helped them inside, settling the old man on her bed while she consulted her grandmother's cookbook. She found a remedy for breathing difficulties, a steam infusion of specific herbs followed by a honey-based syrup. As she prepared the treatment, Mary explained that her father had worked in the Lord's mines for 40 years, and his lungs had gradually weakened from the dust. No physician had been able to offer more than temporary relief. The old man's breathing eased considerably after the steam treatment, and he managed to swallow some of the syrup before falling into a peaceful sleep. The first, Mary claimed, in many months. "How much do I owe you?" Mary asked, tears of gratitude shining in her eyes. "Nothing today," Margot replied. "But perhaps you could bring some flour from the mill when you return for more syrup tomorrow." As word of the miller's improvement spread, even more villagers sought Margot's help. Soon, people were traveling from neighboring villages as well. Margot had to expand her garden twice to keep up with the demand for medicinal herbs, and Thomas proudly helped with planting and harvesting. By autumn, Margot had saved enough to repair the cottage properly. She hired the carpenter to fix the roof and floor, and the blacksmith to forge new hinges for the door and windows. She even purchased 2 goats for milk and a small flock of chickens for eggs. The cookbook continued to reveal its secrets. Margot discovered that if she held certain pages to the light, additional notes appeared, written in invisible ink that only showed when warmed. These hidden recipes contain the most effective remedies of all, treatments for ailments that most considered incurable. One crisp October morning, as Margot was gathering the last of the summer herbs before frost claimed them, Bailiff Olden appeared at her garden gate. He was alone, which was unusual, and his expression was troubled. "Mistress Lowell," he said, removing his cap. "Lord Harrington requests your immediate presence at the manor. It is a matter of great urgency." "What has happened?" Margot asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Lady Harrington has fallen ill. The physician fears she will not survive the night." Margot's heart raced. This was no simple matter. If Lady Harrington died under her care, Lord Harrington might turn against her despite their arrangement. "I will come," she said finally. "Let me gather what I might need and arrange for Thomas." At the manor, Margot found chaos. Servants rushed about with bowls of water and bloodied cloths, while a thin man in physician's robes directed their efforts with increasingly frantic commands. Lady Harrington lay pale and unmoving on her grand bed, her breathing shallow, her skin burning with fever. "What has happened to her?" Margot asked the physician, who regarded her with undisguised contempt. "A fever of the blood," he replied curtly. "I have bled her 3 times, but the fever persists." Margot bit her tongue to prevent herself from commenting on this treatment. Instead, she approached the lady's bedside and gently examined her. Lady Harrington's arms showed multiple lacerations from the bleeding, but Margot also noticed something else: tiny red spots spreading across her chest and neck. Consulting her mental catalogue of her grandmother's remedies, Margot identified the illness as the spotted fever that occasionally swept through villages, often claiming many lives. The cookbook had a specific treatment: a tincture of certain herbs steeped in strong spirits, administered in small doses over several hours, along with cool cloths to draw out the heat. "I need to prepare a remedy," Margot told Lord Harrington, who had been watching silently from the corner. "And the bleeding must stop. It is weakening her further." The physician sputtered in protest, but Lord Harrington silenced him with a gesture. "Do what you must." Through the night, Margot worked tirelessly, administering the tincture drop by drop between Lady Harrington's pale lips, bathing her fevered skin with cool cloths infused with feverfew and mint. As dawn broke, the lady's fever began to recede, and by midday, she opened her eyes. Lord Harrington's relief was palpable. He ordered a chamber prepared for Margot to rest and insisted she remain at the manor until his wife was fully recovered. For 3 days, Margot tended to Lady Harrington, whose strength returned steadily under her care. On the 4th day, as Margot prepared to return home to Thomas, who had been brought to the manor kitchens where he was being thoroughly spoiled by the cook, Lady Harrington asked to speak with her privately. "My husband told me what you know," she said once they were alone, her voice still weak but her eyes sharp. "About the children." Margot tensed, uncertain how to respond. "I wanted both of them," Lady Harrington continued, tears forming in her eyes. "He told me our daughter was stillborn, but I never believed it. A mother knows." She reached for Margot's hand. "Will you help me find her?" The request stunned Margot. "My lady, I know only what my grandmother recorded." She did not name the couple who took the child. "But there must be more information in her belongings," Lady Harrington insisted. Please. She would be 20 now. I have missed her entire childhood, but perhaps I could know her as a woman. Moved by the lady's plea, Margot promised to search for any additional information her grandmother might have left. What she did not reveal was that she had already found another hidden message in the cookbook, one she had not yet deciphered completely. When Margot returned to her cottage, she found Barley waiting excitedly and Thomas bursting with news. "Mother, while you were gone, a grand lady came looking for you," he exclaimed. She was dressed in fine clothes and had a carriage with 4 horses. "A lady?" Margot asked, alarmed. "What did she want?" "She would not say," Thomas replied. "But she left a letter. I put it under your pillow to keep it safe." The letter was sealed with wax bearing an unfamiliar crest. Inside, written in elegant script, was a short message. "Mistress Lowell, I have journeyed far to meet the granddaughter of Agnes Lowell. I believe we have matters of great importance to discuss regarding shared family connections. I will return in 3 days' time and hope to find you at home." With anticipation, Lady Meredith Penshaw. The name meant nothing to Margot, but a sense of foreboding settled over her. That night, she returned to her grandmother's cookbook, focusing on the hidden message she had partially deciphered. Working by candlelight until her eyes burned, she finally revealed the full text. The Harrington girl child was given to Lord and Lady Penshaw of Northumberland. They named her Meredith. They cannot bear children of their own, and swore to love her as their own blood. May God forgive my deception and protect the innocent. Margot's blood ran cold. The lady who had visited, Lady Meredith Penshaw, was Lord Harrington's daughter, the twin sister of the current heir. And she was coming back in 3 days. Those 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Margot cleaned the cottage thoroughly, baked fresh bread, and even traded for a small portion of honey to serve with tea. She considered sending word to Lord Harrington but feared doing so might put Lady Meredith in danger if he wished to keep his secret buried. When the carriage arrived, Margot was waiting outside, her hair neatly braided, wearing her best dress, still humble but clean and carefully mended. Thomas stood beside her, unusually subdued by his mother's evident nervousness. Lady Meredith Penshaw emerged from the carriage with grace, her dark hair and striking features immediately reminding Margot of the Harrington family. She was indeed 20 years of age, beautiful and clearly high-born in her bearing. "Mistress Lowell," she said with a warm smile, "thank you for receiving me." Inside the cottage, over cups of herbal tea sweetened with precious honey, Lady Meredith explained her presence. "My parents, the people who raised me, told me on their deathbed that I was not born to them," she said. "They spoke of a midwife named Agnes Lowell who brought me to them as a newborn, saying only that my birth family could not keep me, but that I was born of noble blood." Margot's throat tightened. "And you seek your birth family now?" Meredith nodded. "I have inherited my adoptive father's lands and title, but I feel incomplete. When I learned that Agnes Lowell's granddaughter had returned to Borrowdale, I hoped you might have information." In that moment, Margot faced a difficult choice. She could reveal everything: the twins' birth, Lord Harrington's order to dispose of the girl child, Lady Harrington's ignorance of her daughter's survival, or she could protect the secret that had kept her and Thomas safe. Before she could decide, Thomas spoke up from where he had been quietly playing with Barley. "Mother, Barley is doing his special bark again." Indeed, the dog was at the window, giving his 3 sharp barks followed by a whine. Someone in need was approaching. A knock came at the door, and Margot opened it to find Bailiff Olden, his face grave. "Mistress Lowell," he began, then stopped abruptly when he saw Lady Meredith. His eyes widened in shock. "What is it, Bailiff?" Margot asked, trying to draw his attention back to her. "Lord Harrington sends for you," he said, still staring at Meredith. "Lady Harrington has had a relapse. He begs your immediate assistance." Margot felt a chill of foreboding. The timing was too convenient. "I will come at once. Lady Meredith, please excuse me. This is an emergency." But Meredith stood, gathering her cloak. "I will accompany you. Perhaps I can be of assistance." Bailiff Olden looked as though he might object, but Margot quickly agreed. Yes, another pair of hands would be welcome. Thomas, you must stay with Barley. Bar the door, and open it only for me. The journey to the manor was tense and silent. As they approached, Margot noticed unusual activity, men-at-arms patrolling the grounds, servants rushing about with concerned expressions. In the great hall, Lord Harrington was pacing, his face ashen. When he saw Margot enter with Meredith beside her, he froze, his expression transforming from worry to shock to something akin to fear. "Who is this?" he demanded, though something in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Before Margot could respond, Lady Harrington appeared at the top of the stairs, looking perfectly healthy. "Edmund," she called down to her husband. "Is the healer here?" Then her eyes fell on Meredith, and she gasped, clutching the banister for support. In that moment of stunned silence, Margot understood. There had been no relapse. This had been a trap to separate Meredith from her, to prevent any revelation of the truth. But the plan had backfired spectacularly with Meredith's insistence on accompanying her to the manor. "My lady," Margot said clearly, "may I present Lady Meredith Penshaw, who has journeyed far to meet you." Lady Harrington descended the stairs slowly, her eyes never leaving Meredith's face. When she reached the bottom, she approached the young woman with trembling hands extended. "You have his eyes," she whispered, "and my mother's chin." Meredith looked confused, but took the older woman's hands in her own. "I do not understand." "I believe," Margot said gently, "that Lady Harrington is your birth mother, and Lord Harrington is your birth father." The revelations that followed were painful, but ultimately healing. Lord Harrington, faced with his wife's joy and his daughter's questions, confessed his deception. The twins' birth had been complicated by inheritance laws, a female born minutes before her brother could have challenged his claim as firstborn heir. In his ambition to secure his son's future, Lord Harrington had made a decision that had haunted his family for 2 decades. By the time winter arrived, bringing snow that blanketed Burrowdale in pristine white, much had changed. Lady Meredith had been officially acknowledged as the Harringtons' daughter, though she maintained her Penshaw title and lands. Lady Harrington, rejuvenated by her daughter's return, had become Margot's most ardent supporter, commissioning a proper apothecary to be built beside Margot's cottage. Villagers still lined up at Margot's door seeking remedies from her grandmother's cookbook, but now she had proper supplies, assistance from a young girl apprentice to learn the healing arts, and the official protection of both the Lord and the Church. The suspicious whispers had turned to respect, and even the physician who had once treated her with contempt now occasionally consulted her on difficult cases. Thomas thrived in their new life, attending lessons with the manor's tutor alongside other village children deemed promising. Barley remained their faithful companion, still hunting rabbits despite his advancing age, and continuing to alert Margot when someone in special need approached. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside, Margot sat by her hearth, now properly rebuilt and well-stocked with firewood, and opened her grandmother's cookbook. She had worked through most of the recipes and remedies, but the book still seemed to hold secrets. Certain pages stuck together despite gentle attempts to separate them, and some passages contained references to recipes she had not yet found. As Thomas and Barley slept peacefully in the now comfortable bed across the room, Margot carefully examined the book's binding. A slight unevenness caught her attention, and using her smallest knife, she carefully loosened the leather to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a small vial of clear liquid and a final note from her grandmother. "My dearest Margot, if you have found this, then you have mastered the knowledge I wish to pass to you. This final elixir is my greatest achievement, a remedy for the failing heart that has saved many who were thought beyond hope. Use it wisely and only in direst need, for its ingredients are rare and the process to create more is recorded only in the hidden pages you have yet to discover. You were always the one I hoped would inherit my legacy. Your mother had not the touch for healing, but I saw it in you even as a child. Know that I have watched over you even in death, guiding Barley to find what you needed most. The greatest treasures are rarely gold or jewels, but knowledge, compassion, and the courage to use both wisely. You have found your true inheritance now, my child. With eternal love. Grandmother Agnes' tears blurred Margot's vision as she held the vial to the firelight. From worthless inheritance to priceless legacy, her grandmother's final gift had transformed not just Margot's life, but the lives of an entire community. Outside, villagers began to sing carols as they processed through the snow toward the church for midnight services. Margot gently closed the cookbook, tucking the vial and notes safely inside. Tomorrow, there would be more visitors seeking healing, more recipes to perfect, more secrets to uncover. But tonight, in this moment of peace, Margot Lowell, once a desperate widow with nothing but a threadbare dress and a hungry child, offered silent thanks for the inheritance that had seemed so worthless and proved so precious: a dilapidated cottage, a faithful dog, a mysterious cookbook, and the wisdom of a grandmother who had planned for her future with more care than anyone had ever shown her before.